What happens when you give a media personality and a sex therapist a podcast? You get Spill the Tea, a bold, unfiltered space where no topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the messy, hilarious, and heartbreaking realities of life. Will Nash and Maria Orego serve up real talk with expert insight, hot takes, and a whole lot of tea.
Can be a lot of fun, but the group that you go with is the most important thing. Like, you have to really think hard about who you want to have with you on those vacations, because it's a vacation, but hello, you're possibly, well, hopefully getting married, right? That's the whole idea behind it all.
Yeah, it's a lot of expense though too, right? You're asking these people to like spend money on going on vacation and spending an entire week. But I do agree, like the group of people that you go with, because you're stuck there at an all-inclusive for a week or 10 days with these humans, right? That you have to interact with. And then, yeah, a wedding at the end. A lot
One
of
of the things I always will say is, if a close friend of mine tells me that they're going to get married and do a destination, like, like, we would like to invite you. Is that an expense you're willing to take, and would you go? And I mean, depending on the person, to be quite honest with you, if I'm close with this person, I'm like, I can go to the wedding, get myself a vacation. I'm gone for a week. The wedding itself is only, in most cases, going to take 1 out of 7 days. And I don't have to buy them a wedding present because I am the gift. I am showing up to your wedding. I'm supporting you. And yeah, but I mean, I wouldn't do it for everyone. I'll tell you, there are people who I would not do it for, even if they're friends, because it's just too much of a liability with some people. I mean, you throw some alcohol, and, warm weather around people, they just get uninhibited.
That's true. Oh my gosh, it can get really dangerous. We actually had friends send out a poll. They got engaged and they sent out a poll to all the people that they wanted to invite to the wedding. And they were like, would you attend a destination wedding in this country on like maybe these dates? And then like, yes, no, maybe. And so they got kind of an idea of who would be willing to travel or not travel. I love that though. You're right. You get alcohol, sunshine,
Mhm.
and not a lot of food in you, and you've got basically a disaster waiting to happen on an all-inclusive vacation.
And let's not forget, yes, there's alcohol. And yes, a lot of new, exciting, sexy people potentially around you on this trip. If you've ever been to a place like Jamaica, as well as many other places in the Caribbean, there are some other substances that are pretty easy to get, which can also enhance the entire experience of you being somewhere else, anywhere but home. And a lot of people just want to get away from where they are right now, without getting too political, which is the way that things are. They're just looking for that escape anywhere but here.
Yes, the question that I get oftentimes from couples is why is our vacation sex and intimacy better than it is at home? And I always tell people that's because you're on vacation. You left your stress behind, you left your anxieties of work, children, relationships, family, whatever it is. You're in a different country. It's like you're living through a fantasy, right? Of creating a life for yourself, maybe even an identity of who you are, which you're not actually at home,
Yeah.
and then you decide to have like maybe the wildest sex you've ever had, or you choose to have sex with other people. Like you said, right? You're on a beach, you have sexy people around you, or even staff that are wonderful and helpful and lovely. That also becomes an issue for a lot of people, right? Having sex with the staff at these all-inclusive resorts. It can get tricky. It can get pretty spicy pretty quickly.
It's such an interesting concept when you think about the staff, because anytime that I've been to an all inclusive, which I mean, I've been a number of times, but I mean, I haven't been in a few years. I see the staff at some of these resorts, and no one I know is working harder than they do. And then they still manage to find the time to squeeze that in. So power to them. Power to them. They can find the time for a 15-hour workday and then finding someone to have some fun with on the beach.
Oh
Go
my
off.
It's so true. All-inclusive resorts are something else. They're an animal in and of themselves, but I think people also go to do that. They go to turn off their brain, to turn off their inhibitions, to become someone or something that they're not, experience things that they wouldn't experience back at home without any judgment. Because at the end of the day, you're there for 7 days, maybe 14. nobody knows you when you get back, right? Nobody actually knows what happened. It's kind of the idea of like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. It's the same thing with all inclusive vacations.
Now, do you have you ever been on a trip? And I mean, you can share a story from your life if you like, or from a friend of yours, anonymous as always, as it is here on the Spill the Tea podcast, where they kind of had some crazy thing happen where they hooked up with someone and maybe they were in a relationship, or maybe they were just single and they were looking to put themselves out there, and it just ended up being like drama, 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 or just something that was out of control. And then they dried up, the hangover is done, and then it's like, my life is a fucking mess now. Like, do you know anyone who's been through something like
Say
that?
yes. I will say yes, but this was like way back in the day when I was much younger. We had a group of friends that actually met at an all-inclusive resort, and then we'd go back to the same place a number of times. One of those people decided that she would take a staff member back to her bedroom, and she was discovered by her partner. So that was a whole thing. So she was there with her partner on vacation. She chose to go back to the hotel room with a staff member after we had been to like the resort clubs and like had been having a great time. And then her partner, when he came back into the bedroom, he found them both having sex. And that was a lot of drama that was very unnecessary, unfortunately.
Okay, so Maria, can I just say something? And I don't know this person you're speaking about. You haven't even told me her name, like off the podcast. How stupid were they to go and have sex with this employee of the resort in the bedroom that she was there with her boyfriend, partner, girlfriend, whatever? Like, if you're not that I would do it, but if you're gonna do it, like, why are they doing it in the place? Like, there's a good chance that you have a couple of key cards that he's going to come back in. Like, did you think that her partner had magically disappeared? Like, what, or was she just that intoxicated?
I think there's two sides to that because I think, yes, intoxication has a lot to do with it. Unfortunately, your inhibitions are down, you're not making the right decisions. You think you're living in a fantasy, right? There is that idea of the world and the reality that you're in is created in your mind. The alcohol has a lot to do with that. I will also say, though, unfortunately, there's also the sexual thrill and the deviance of the fact that she, and I don't know, we never talked about it. It was a whole thing within our friend group. It was never really, and I wasn't a therapist at the time, so I stayed out. It wasn't my monkey, not my circus. But the deviancy of it, I think, had a lot to do with it too, right? The idea of getting caught, like you're in the bedroom with the bedroom that you're sharing with your partner. You've got this staff member, which in and of itself is deviant and pretty spicy. You're having sex in the bed that you're sharing with your partner. And then you have the possibility of them walking in. But I mean, we've talked about it many times. When it comes to infidelity, it's like your brain just like shuts down and no reason gets in, and you are functioning at a totally different level and you're not making the right decisions. You're not thinking straight, which is sad, but very real. That is what's happening.
And when you put it like that, it completely makes sense. I guess because I wasn't, in that situation specifically, I was thinking a little more logically than, say, if I would have been in that position myself. Now, the other thing is, do you think that this is someone, or if someone's doing this, not even your friend or whatnot, do you think that some people put themselves in these positions because they're trying to self destruct, and that relationship, obviously, that relationship isn't providing for them in the way that it once was, and it's like, well, you know what, I'm gonna take this server from the bar who's been serving me pina coladas all week long, bring him out to my bedroom, have some fun, because I just don't know, and I don't know if this sounds chaotic, me saying this, but because I don't know how to end the relationship, I just kind of want to be destructive and end it that way. Is that actually a thing as well?
For sure. There's so many reasons why you would do it. You would do it for self destruction, to get attention from your partner, right? This person's giving me love, attention, like romance, affection, telling me that I'm hot or this or that, like, or they're giving me sex that you haven't given me in forever. So there's that allure, right? But then there's also the self medicating part, right? Like, how like maybe sad, stressed, depressed you might be in your relationship. So you're self medicating and self soothing by seeking somebody else for that validation. There's so many reasons why people do this, but I will say on vacation, it tends to happen a lot more because of the circumstances, the context around it. And I think this is very uh, maybe I don't want to call it our entire generation, but it is very common within millennials. We all grew up going to all inclusives, right? This was our life in our like 18 to 30-year-old range. We went to all inclusives. We left those stories there. We didn't have social media and like phones to take pictures with. And a lot of our stories were thankfully left in the past. But this was a huge thing for us. And I think it's obviously still happening.
I think too, back when millennials were like late teens in their 20s as well. At that time, it was a lot more affordable to go on an all-inclusive resort. Like you can go somewhere for like $750 or $1,000, and I mean now that's not so much the case. However, it was just a very affordable way to vacation and not completely blow the budget. So maybe they're now, if they're doing it and they're in their 30s or even like late 30s, it's a little bit of a throwback with the nostalgia thing too, right? Oh, I remember I used to do this with my group of girlfriends, back when I was in my early 20s, and now I'm in my mid 30s, but I have a kid and I have a husband and I have mortgage payments or rent and whatnot. It's like it's kind of taking it back to that time, and it makes sense that you kind of lose a little bit of self-awareness. You lose that sense of self and you get caught up in the hype. You get caught up in the fantasy, because the reality of it is, depending on where you land on the judgment scale of things, and obviously, we're not condoning cheating by any means. However, it does happen. It is a part of life. It is a part of relationships. But then you kind of like I said, you dry out, you sober up, and you've had your water, and you're like, oh man, like I really kind of screwed this up, and how do I carry on?
I agree. You know, the show that actually shows this really well is White Lotus. I think that they do a great job of showing that idea of like you're away at a resort, you kind of take on this new identity and this new persona that you would never do anywhere else. And then you make decisions, right? You make choices while you're there that either grow in a positive, progressive way, your relationship or your life, or you
Yeah.
self-destruct and make some mistakes along the way. But I do actually love that show for that reason, that it shows how people on vacation just create this new identity for themselves and then make these mistakes, right? And then you see them like going home in that like hungover, sad,
Mhm.
depressed, oh my God, I have to go back to my real life now. What just happened with those last 7 days? And having to process that like quote unquote trauma, right?
And that's just it. It is trauma. And I know personally, I know some people who have been in situations, been in relationships where they have cheated, they have stepped out, and some deal with it. And whether or not they're speaking to a therapist, I don't know all their business. Some people are able to do that, to cheat, to step into the relationship and carry on. I mean, not to say they don't have a conscience, but they find it easier to do than others. And other people, it just eats at them until it completely blows up their entire life. And I could kind of understand why that would happen also.
Yeah, I've worked with couples that have said that if it happens on vacation, for some reason, it's like a different level of acceptance. Just the idea of like they're away, again, that idea of fantasy, right? The context, we're away, we're having fun, there's drinks involved, there's friends, there's that flirtatious nature of being on vacation. And so I've had couples disclose that they've had affairs within that vacation context, and the forgiveness came faster than it would if it had happened here at home. And I think it's because you leave it there. There's
Mhm.
something in our psyche of like, it's like a one night, we're agreeing to this kind of implicitly that whatever happens on vacation, at least it stays in that country, on that beach. No one can have access to it again. So I do wonder that permission that happens within relationships too of this stuff happening, because it does. And
It
maybe
does
people are
happen.
expecting it to happen.
Well, and the thing is, too, is, you mentioned some examples like White Lotus and even so many of the reality shows that are out there now. Like, usually they're not filming at home. Usually they are on location in these exotic paradises, really even going to like The Bachelor and all these sort of things, right? Where it's like it is that fantasy, and it's the fantasy that obviously most people I think are honest with themselves would like to make it a reality. I mean, who wouldn't want to live in some of these exotic, glamorous places? But I think that even if you were, that fantasy or that reality sets in. Like it will eventually set in. The vacation has to end, and the sort of glitter and glamour of it all will come to an end. And that actually kind of leads us into our question on Spill
Oh,
the Tea.
exciting. Let's do it. Spill the tea question.
All right. So thank you for sending this in. Hey, Will and Maria, I'm on vacation for a friend's wedding and having the best time. I came here with my husband, but I've met someone. And over the last 5 days, we've gotten really close. We've been intimate and we're both falling for each other. We're planning to meet up when we get back to Canada. I don't think I can go home to my husband now. Okay. Do I tell him here or wait until we get back to sort it out? What would you do in this scenario? Fantasy's over. It's over.
Fantasy's over and you're still making a decision. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
So at the end of the day, do I tell him here or do we wait until I get back? So we've been talking about the whole concept of this just fantasy being a reality when you're on vacation, but it's starting to set in and she's still there.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot of layers right there. I'm gonna say gut instinct, maybe more like on my professional hat on right now. You wait until you come home and reality does actually set in because the decisions you're making on vacation might be within the fantasy world, and you may not actually want to see this person that you've been sleeping with and connected with back home because again reality sets in and this may just be a person that you were infatuated in with. There was lust, there was that like hot sex kind of context. I would wait until you get back and have a real serious adult mature conversation about what happened.
This is not coming from a professional stance because I am not a licensed therapist.
You're a therapist on a
I
podcast.
am a therapist on a podcast with no papers behind me that say that I am licensed. So I think the thing that's concerning to me, well, number one, as much as I want to have a different opinion than you do, I do actually agree with you. Wait until you go back. The other thing that's kind of interesting to me is, do you think it's truly fair to make life altering decisions about your marriage? I think it was marriage, right? Husband. Yeah.
Yeah.
Marriage and relationship and life based on a 5 day fling. Like, I know people get together in a few days and start a relationship that way. But I just think after all the stuff we've talked about being on vacation and being in another world, escaping reality, I think you need to give it a little more time. I think that you should be honest with him when you get back from vacation. You know, sounds bad, but enjoy the last little bit of your vacation. Take that as you will. But it's a big power move to be making that decision about your marriage. I mean, I don't know how long this person has been married for, but those are pretty life altering decisions. And I mean, really, like, is this guy who you've just messed around with in Cuba, Jamaica, wherever you are, is he going to follow you? Right? Not necessarily. You don't know that. There's nothing in writing that you might be in love with him. He could only want you for sex and be in lust with you. And then, you know what? I'm sorry, but when her vacation is over, someone else has come to that island and he's on to the next one.
Yeah, no, I do agree with you. And I know that that sounds like pretty skeptical on our part, but I do think that you have to be very careful and very cautious in these situations. 5 days on vacation in that vacuum of a fantasy, you can't make decisions about that are life altering. But again, we also have to look at there's a reason why you did what you did, and there's a reason why that like area of your heart was open to falling in love and falling in lust with somebody else. There's clearly something going on within your marriage, and I would focus on that first in trying to either heal the marriage if it's like if you're able to, or just taking time away from all relationships and working on your relationship with yourself. Because I do think that these things, they always tell us something, right? They're evidence towards something deeper that's going on within us. It's not always about falling in love or sex or vacation. It's sometimes little evidence clips of, hey, there's something deeper here going on, and maybe we should examine that first.
One of the things since we started doing this podcast that I just think is so genius and brilliant when it comes to you and your seriously, your feedback and your advice and your professional help is the whole concept. In just give me a minute, you'll see where I'm going here. When it comes to opening up your relationship and having a contract and really laying things out, being communicative with each other. Don't be like, wishy washy on what's allowed and what's not allowed. When you go on vacation with your partner, especially if you're at an adult resort, if you are at, let's take it, a gay resort, because stuff happens there too. A lot of stuff happens there. Maybe one day I'll get there. But anyways,
The stories. Oh, wait, get there as in like get to a gay resort or get there and to like spill the tea?
I'll go back to that. So what I'm saying now is,
We digress.
do you think that you should set a contract in place before you go on vacation if you're going to an adults only resort with your partner? Or should that just be no, like you're in a relationship, you're both happy, you both love each other, you're going to sleep together? Or is that not something that should be done for couples going on vacation?
Oh my gosh, 100% yes. But I'm always in favor of that because it's about communicating. You don't have to write it down, but on the way to your vacation, like while you're on the plane or even just like driving there, just like what's acceptable, what's not acceptable? Am I allowed to flirt with the bartender in order to get more free drinks? Am I allowed to chat with other people or go dancing without you for the night? And then can I engage in more like connective dancing and like that kind of stuff? Yeah, I think those conversations are insanely important. So if you can have a contract for your vacation, yes, please do that. I will say too, there are also swingers resorts, right? So there are like resorts that actually have this already embedded. It's explicit. There are conversations, there are contracts, everybody knows what they're doing, which is probably the safest thing because they have talked about it, right? Which I love. And then again, you have these adult resorts where people aren't talking about it. And then you find your wife in bed with somebody else and you thought one thing, she thought another, right? I would love if every couple did this, but then I would probably also go out of business. But
Hey, nobody needs that. Nobody needs that. The thing is, though, is what do you say to a couple? Maybe they're sitting in your office and you come up with this idea, this concept, which I know you stand behind for other situations and relationships. And the person says, we don't need that. We're committed. We're in love. We've never cheated. We've never stepped into the relationship. How would you react to that?
oh, I get that all the time because I always get the fact that it's not romantic, right? And so my pushback usually is it's more romantic than getting a divorce, first of all. Or right? Or you come back to my office 3 weeks after your vacation and telling me that one of you did something that you weren't supposed to do, right? That was in an implicit contract.
Uh-huh.
And then I also just list off scenarios. I'm like, okay, so your partner goes to the bar and is like caressing the bartender's arm, asking for free drinks. The guy like goes over the bar and kisses your partner. Is that cheating? And usually the partner will have like 1,000 different answers. But if the answer is yes, well, then we need a contract. We need to know because then your partner needs to know that she or he are not allowed to do that. When you set the scenarios up, people start thinking like, oh, we haven't actually thought this through. Because yes, you can be in a very loving, committed relationship, but your loving, committed relationship has a different definition than my loving, committed relationship. And therefore, we need to talk about it. You cannot assume your partner is on the same contract as you are if you've never talked about it. And I say this to monogamous relationships all the time. And when I start asking questions, it is fascinating to see how people that say they're in like a committed relationship answer the question differently.
It's all perspective, I would assume, in this situation, right? With the question that we're talking about today, or with any sort of drama or situation that comes up when you're on vacation with your partner. Yeah, it's one of these things where you're like, you just don't know what's going to happen in your relationship, no matter how committed you are, no matter how in love you are, no matter how many kids you have back at home in Canada, until you get there and until maybe the other person, or maybe it's you, does something that might not even actually be necessarily your definition of cheating, but just is doing something that is flirtatious or does something that makes you feel uncomfortable. So you need to be prepared for what happens when it's all over. And are you like this person who's a listener of the podcast and after 5 days telling her partner about this, debating telling him while they're still on vacation, and seriously consider uprooting her life based on 5 days of passion?
Yeah, which I mean, good for you. You found passion back in your life, but that's telling us something that maybe you should examine a little bit further and have a conversation with your partner as well about that. I actually want to go back to something you just said about the idea of like we're committed and we love each other. I will often say to my couples, and they usually hate me for this, love is actually not enough for a relationship. It will not keep you in a relationship, and it is not enough to have a sustainable, committed relationship. Love is beautiful. I have nothing against love, but it is not what makes a relationship work. So when I ask people questions about like, why are we making this work, or why are we sacrificing, or why are we trying to heal this, and they tell me it's because we love each other, my answer is always that's not enough. They don't love it.
So hearing you say that, I want to know what makes it enough. Is it communication? Is it honesty? Is it transparency? Like, what is it that makes it enough
Oh, I
to
love
have
it.
to have a successful romantic relationship with someone? For
Yeah. I'm gonna leave that one on a cliffhanger, and I think we do an episode about that one of like love is love enough. I think we do that. I'm not even gonna answer. I'm gonna leave it, and then everyone can like. Will's so excited. He's like, "Oh my god, now I want to do it now." Let's talk about that one on a different podcast. I think it's a very different conversation. But yes, I will say love is not enough, and we can talk about that in a different one because I think that's also important for the spill the tea question of today. Even if you are falling quote unquote in love with this person, that does not, it's not the entire recipe for a relationship. So examine what's actually going on there.
is it lust? Is it hot sex? Like, is it an open relationship? Like, is it, what is it? I want to know. I want to know now.
You're gonna have to wait, Will.
Mm. You just like dangling these carrots in front of me. Like, you've known me for too long now to know that this actually kills me, Maria.
This is so
But
fun.
from my professional standpoint of this podcast, I think we'll just have to kind of give our last sip right now because I'm going to be mad at you if we don't wrap this episode up soon.
Okay, you go first. That way it distracts you. What's your last sip for today's podcast question of vacation flings and telling your partner about them?
I think that I understand when you're on a vacation, even if you're in a committed relationship and if you're in love, which isn't enough, according to Maria, that things can get a little foggy. But I think that what you should do is just be honest with yourselves and each other before going into this, because there's going to be no hope out of it if you're not. And even if you realize that this could be why they're sitting in an office with a therapist, I think that if you're not honest with each other going into it and coming out of it, it will eventually catch up to you. Even if you think it won't, and you're okay with cheating and not telling your partner, it will catch up to you at some point.
Yes, totally agree with that. My last tip for today is if you're doing these things on vacation, you may want to think about what's going on at home and examine why you're becoming a fully different person while you're away living that fantasy, because you can have both at home if you're really true to who you are and who your identity is.
As always, great advice. Of course, this has been the Spill the Tea podcast. Do not forget to rate us, give us 5 stars, subscribe so you get notifications when we have a new episode that drops. And that's the tea.
That's it for this episode of Spill the Tea. If you loved what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave your